The forgotten Titan. The world was quiet now, but not with peace, only the silence of something long dead. Once this wasteland had been alive with cities that reached toward the skies, with great fleets that cast shadows across the stars. Now it was rubble. Blackened husks of towers jutted from the ground like broken teeth, and the sand carried the ash of 1 billion lives lost to war. And at the center of it all, chained to a crumbling stone dais, lay the beast. It was enormous, a titan of flesh and bone laced with alien steel, its massive shoulders hunched and scarred. Its mane, once shimmering with radiant energy, hung ragged and blood-stained. Claws that had shredded warships now rested dull against the cracked stone floor. Its golden eyes, dim with exhaustion, stared at the sky. It remembered the war. It remembered being summoned by its people, revered as their protector, their last defense against enemies too powerful to resist. It had fought, and it had bled, tearing apart machines, beasts, and soldiers alike. But war cared nothing for loyalty. War ground down everything, even gods. The beast had lost, and when the final battle ended, its people, the very civilization it had bled for, looked upon their broken guardian and saw not a hero, but a liability. Too dangerous, one counselor had whispered when they gathered to decide its fate. Too wounded to control, another muttered. It will only bring more enemies upon us, the last concluded. The decision had been swift. The beast was chained, bound with shackles laced with null metal that burned its flesh and suppressed its strength. Left behind, abandoned like a broken weapon that no longer served a purpose. The council told themselves it was mercy, that the chains would give it a quiet death, that leaving it to fade was kinder than ending it outright. But the beast knew the truth. It had been discarded. Years blurred together. The skies above never changed, always heavy with ash. Time meant little when there was no company but pain. The beast's body healed in patches, but never fully. Its wounds too deep, its spirit too fractured. It did not even rage anymore. There was no point. Still it lived. That, perhaps, was the greatest cruelty of all. It listened sometimes, when storms cleared, to the faint signals from the stars. Fleets passed overhead, alien tongues buzzing across the calms. The galaxy moved on, but no one ever returned to this place. No one but scavengers, who fled the moment they saw it. No one wanted the burden of a forgotten titan. So it waited for death, though death refused to come. Then, one day, the silence broke. The beast stirred when the tremor of descent shook the ground. Its ears twitched at the whine of an atmosphere-breaching craft. Dust plumed in the distance, and for the first time in decades, foreign engines touched the dead world. Through narrowed eyes, it saw them. Figures disembarking, fragile in form but purposeful in stride. They were not of its people. Their frames were smaller, their armor strange, their voices carried in a tongue the beast had never heard before. It bared its teeth. It did not matter who they were. It had seen enough of civilized species to know what would come next. Fear, violence, abandonment. It was the cycle of the galaxy. The humans approached slowly, cautiously, their steps crunching over ash. One of them pointed toward the dais. Another raised a device, scanning, murmuring numbers to the others. The beast snarled, a sound like thunder cracking the desert, and the ground trembled. Chains rattled violently, their null metal biting deep into its flesh. Dust fell from the ruined pillars. The air grew thick with menace. The humans froze. Any sensible species would have fled. Yet they did not. One of them, broad-shouldered, with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. He removed his helmet, exposing his face to the beast. His eyes, brown and steady, locked with the Titan's golden ones. The beast expected fear. It saw none, only something unfamiliar. Pity. Another human knelt, unpacking something from a crate. A container of liquid, clear as crystal. Water. The scent hit the beast's nostrils like a memory of rain, and its throat tightened with a need it had long forgotten. But it refused. With a growl, it turned its head away. These strangers were like the others. They would leave. They always did. The scarred human spoke then, his voice calm and firm, though the words were alien. The beast could not understand the language, but it understood the tone. He was not threatening. He was not pleading. He was promising. Still, promises meant nothing. The humans lingered anyway. They set down supplies near the dais, careful not to cross into striking distance of its claws. Food, water, medical instruments, all things the beast had been denied for decades. When they finally retreated to their camp, the Titan lay in silence, glaring at the offerings. Suspicion warred with hunger. It waited for the night, for them to vanish as all others had. But in the darkness, it heard their voices carried by the wind. Unfamiliar words, but filled with laughter. Laughter! In this graveyard of a world. The beast closed its eyes, and for the first time in centuries, it wondered. Perhaps these were not like the others. Perhaps. The human touch. Morning came pale and gray over the ruined world. The beast stirred as the light broke through drifting clouds, its massive body still heavy with exhaustion. Its eyes opened, glowing faintly like embers buried in ash, and they fell upon the objects left behind the night before. Food, water, bandages. It had not touched them. It had expected them to be poisoned or bait for some cruel trick. Yet the scent still lingered, rich and fresh, gnawing at the edges of its hunger. Its stomach growled, loud as distant thunder. Still, the Titan forced itself to remain still. Pride and suspicion were all it had left. Then the humans returned. They emerged from their camp with the dawn, their voices carrying across the silent wasteland. The beast watched as they approached, this time more boldly than before. There were 6 of them, clad in strange armor with patches and insignias stitched across their chests. Their faces were uncovered now, showing skin of different tones, hair of different colors, but each carried the same expression of grim determination. One, the scarred leader, carried a container of water in both hands. Another, smaller human with sharp eyes and nimble fingers, carried instruments that gleamed faintly in the sun. The beast's muscles tensed, expecting weapons. But instead, the human sat near the chained dais and began to work, not to harm, but to help. The scarred one placed the water near its claws, well within reach. Then he sat down, cross-legged, and waited. No sudden movements, no threats, just patience. The beast growled low, chains rattling. It wanted to lunge, to snap, to drive them away before hope could creep back into its chest. But the hunger was too strong, the thirst too sharp. Slowly, cautiously, it dipped its great head, lips brushing the container. The water was cool, clean, real. It drank. The humans did not cheer. They did not flinch. They only nodded to one another, as though this had been inevitable. For the first time in decades, the beast's parched throat was soothed. The simple act unsettled it more than any battle had. The smaller human, the one with sharp eyes, began to move closer. They carried strange tools, cutters, welders, scanners that hummed softly. The beast snarled, hackles rising, but the scarred leader raised his hand, speaking calmly. The tone was steady, commanding, like one warrior to another. The beast did not understand the words, but something in its chest eased. Against its own instincts it stilled. The smaller human approached the chains. They crouched low, examining the alien null metal that bound the Titan's legs. The restraints pulsed with faint blue energy, digging into the flesh where scars had never healed. The human touched the metal, hissed at the heat, then muttered something to the others. A second human came forward, carrying a portable generator, attaching cables, studying readouts. They were not trying to tighten the chains. They were trying to break them. The beast's heart, vast and thunderous, skipped a beat. The first cut sent sparks flying. The null metal hissed, resisting, but the human did not falter. Again and again they struck with their tools, sweat dripping down their brow. The beast could smell the determination on them, raw and unyielding. It could have crushed them. One swipe of a claw, one snap of its jaws, and the fragile beings would be gone. That thought lingered, as it always did, a voice whispering survival above all else. But another voice, quieter, asked, why would they free what others had chained? When the first shackle cracked open, The beast felt the weight of centuries lift from its limb. Pain gave way to numb relief. It pulled its paw back slowly, staring at the freed limb, almost disbelieving. The smaller human looked up, their face smeared with grime, and smiled. The beast flinched at the expression. It had never seen a smile offered without malice or superiority. It did not know how to respond. The humans worked for hours. They fed it carefully, strips of meat seared over portable fires, placed just within reach. They dressed its wounds with bandages soaked in strange healing gels. They spoke often, their voices carrying warmth even when the words were incomprehensible. By the time the second shackle fell away, the beast was trembling, not from weakness, but from something far more alien to it than war or abandonment. Hope. Yet even as this fragile bond formed, the world reminded them of its cruelty. Late in the afternoon, the ground shook again, not with the tremor of approaching storms, but with the rumble of engines. The beast's ears flicked toward the horizon, catching the shrill whistle of alien vessels cutting through the sky. The humans looked up, faces hardening. They knew the sound too. Sleek skimmers descended, painted in the colors of the council that had once bound the beast. Armed soldiers poured out, weapons gleaming under the sun. Their leader barked orders, his voice carrying across the ash plain. Step away from the monster. The words rang out, translated through mechanical speakers. It is cursed. It is dangerous. You do not know what you are dealing with. The humans did not move. The scarred leader stood tall, his weapon still slung at his back, and shouted something back in his own tongue. His voice was defiant, his stance unyielding. The soldiers raised their rifles. The beast's heart pounded. It had seen this before, the fear in the eyes of those who called it monster, the condemnation, the chains. And yet here at its side were beings who had no reason to risk themselves, no history with it, no obligation. And still, they stood between it and the rifles. For the first time, the Titan wondered. Perhaps it was not abandoned by everyone. After all, war of compassion. The standoff stretched across the ash plains like a drawn blade. On one side, the alien soldiers stood in formation, weapons leveled, their banners fluttering in the hot wind. Their armor gleamed with the same sigils once painted on the beast's chains, a reminder that these were its jailers, the descendants of those who had bound it to rot. On the other side, 6 humans stood in a line before the chained Titan. They were dwarfed by both the soldiers and the beast itself, their gear battered, their rifles slung casually at their sides. Yet their stance carried a quiet defiance, as though they had faced down death before and found it wanting. "Step aside," the alien commander barked again, his voice magnified through a translator. "That creature is a war criminal, a monster. You cannot save it. You endanger yourselves by even standing near it." The scarred human leader shifted his stance, hand resting on his hip, and spoke in his guttural tongue. The words were foreign to the beast, but the tone carried no fear. His voice was calm, firm, resolute. The translator unit at the soldier's side crackled as one of the humans activated their own. The machine struggled to interpret the raw, human cadence, but the meaning came through clear. "We don't abandon the wounded. Not our own. Not anyone." The soldiers muttered in disbelief. One even laughed, sharp and bitter. The commander raised his rifle higher. "You don't understand what you're protecting." That beast tore through fleets. Entire colonies fell because of its rage. At that, the beast lowered its head, eyes dimming. It had no defense. The commander spoke the truth. It had slaughtered countless enemies, perhaps innocents too, in its time as a living weapon. Guilt had gnawed at it during its decades of chains. But then the scarred human spoke again, his voice rising like a challenge hurled into the wind. "You chained it. You left it to die, and still it lives. You call that mercy?" The words rippled through the beast's chest, though it did not fully understand them. It understood the fire behind them. Where the aliens saw only fear, the humans saw something else. Worth. The soldiers shifted uneasily, but their commander would not relent. "Stand down, or you'll share its fate." The scarred leader glanced back at the beast, his brown eyes hard with determination. He raised his weapon slowly, not in fear, but in readiness. The other humans mirrored him, rifles snapping into place, forming a thin but unbreakable line in front of the chain titan. The beast's chest tightened. Why? Why would such fragile beings risk annihilation for something they barely knew? Because, whispered a thought, they're not like the others. The first shot cracked across the plain. Energy bolts screamed through the air, slamming into stone and sand. The humans dove into cover, returning fire in disciplined bursts. Their movements were coordinated, precise, not the panicked scrambling of prey, but the calm aggression of hunters who had trained their whole lives for this moment. Still, they were outnumbered. Dozens of soldiers pressed forward, their rifles blazing, their war cries shrill. The humans fought with grit, but grit alone could not hold the line. And then, something inside the beast broke free. Not the chains. Not yet. But something deeper. The last shard of will buried under centuries of despair. It would not watch them die. A roar erupted from its chest, so loud the battlefield froze. The ground shook as the beast surged against its restraints. The null metal burned. The chains groaned. Stone cracked beneath its claws. With a final, shattering heave, one of the shackles snapped apart, glowing shards scattering like sparks. The soldiers staggered back in horror as the titan rose to its full height, towering above them like a mountain come alive. Its mane blazed faintly once more, eyes burning gold. The beast leapt. It crashed into the alien lines with earth-shaking force, claws carving through metal and bone alike. Soldiers screamed, scattering under the onslaught. Weapons that had cowed planets shattered against its hide. The air filled with dust and blood. And yet, it did not kill without thought. For the first time, its fury was not blind. It struck only those who threatened the humans. It shielded them, intercepting volleys meant to tear them down. The humans fought at its side, covering its flanks with disciplined fire. Where its claws tore apart armored carriers, their grenades toppled turrets. Where its roar sent soldiers fleeing, their steady rifles picked off the ones who dared stand. For the first time in its long, brutal life, the beast was not fighting alone. The battle raged for what felt like hours. By the time the alien forces broke, retreating in disbelief, the field was littered with smoking wrecks and scorched craters. The beast collapsed to its knees, chest heaving, blood dripping from new wounds. The effort of breaking free had drained it, and the fight had nearly undone what little strength it had regained. Its massive head lowered toward the ash, vision swimming. But before darkness could claim it, small hands pressed against its wounds. The humans swarmed around it, shouting to one another, their voices urgent but not panicked. They wrapped its injuries with bandages, injected healing compounds, poured water across its scorched hide. They would not let it fall. The beast's vision cleared enough to see the scarred leader leaning against its shoulder, steadying himself after the battle. His face was streaked with grime and blood, but his eyes still burned bright. He reached up, resting a hand against the titan's flank, small, fragile, yet firm. "Not alone," he said. The words were foreign, but the beast understood. For the first time in centuries, it did not feel abandoned. A new bond forged. The battlefield lay quiet again, but not with the stillness of despair. This silence was different. It was victory's breath. Smoke curled from the wreckage of alien skimmers, and the ash plains were scattered with the remnants of battle. The alien soldiers had fled, their courage broken by the impossible sight of humans standing side by side with the beast they had abandoned. The titan lay on its side, chest heaving with labored breaths. Its wounds burned, its body screamed for rest, yet it remained alive. More than alive, it had chosen to fight again. That realization lingered in its chest like a spark, struggling to catch flame. The humans moved quickly, tending to both themselves and their colossal companion. Bandages wrapped scorched flesh, sprays of antiseptic hissed across wounds, and portable generators powered strange machines that hummed soothing tones. To the beast, it was an unfamiliar ritual. Its own people had left it to bleed. These small, fragile creatures refused to let it fall. The scarred leader stood closest, his face pale with exhaustion but resolute. He spoke softly, patting the Titan's armored flank as though steadying a comrade. The words were alien, yet the tone carried meaning. You are not alone. Rest. We'll hold the line. For the first time in centuries, the beast closed its eyes not in despair, but in trust. The days that followed blurred together. The humans built a camp around the dais where the chains had fallen. They raised shelters, lit fires, and sent signals into the stars. They returned often to the Titan's side, bringing food, medicine, and, strangely, conversation. They talked to it as though it could answer. The smaller one with sharp eyes muttered constantly, explaining the repairs they made to their equipment, sketching diagrams in the dust to illustrate concepts. The medic hummed as they worked, a soothing melody that cut through the silence. Even the scarred leader sometimes leaned against the Titan's massive shoulder, speaking in low tones as if confiding in an old friend. The beast could not understand their words, but it understood their intent. Compassion, patience, loyalty. With each passing day, the wounds healed. Muscles regained strength. The dull glow in its mane brightened faintly. The humans watched this transformation with awe, whispering among themselves that it was no mere beast, but something greater, a guardian unjustly forgotten. The Titan listened, though it still wrestled with doubt. Could it truly be more than a weapon? Could it deserve such devotion? The answer came weeks later. From orbit, fleets descended once more. Not scavengers, not raiders, but an assembly of ships belonging to the council that had condemned it. Their banners darkened the skies, fleets bristling with weapons. They had not forgotten. They had come to finish what they had started. The humans prepared to evacuate, but the scarred leader shook his head. He turned to the Titan, placing his hand firmly against its leg. His voice was quiet, but carried the weight of command. We will stand together. The beast rose, towering above the camp, strength flowing through its body in ways it had not felt in decades. No longer chained, no longer resigned. When the fleets landed, soldiers poured forth, chanting accusations of monster, criminal, abomination. They expected fear. They expected the humans to flee. Instead, they found themselves staring into golden eyes that blazed like suns, and beside them, 6 humans who refused to retreat. The commander of the alien host shouted threats, promises of annihilation. The beast remembered those words. It had once believed them, but not now. With a roar that split the sky, it stepped forward, placing itself between the humans and the advancing armies. The ground quaked with each stride. Chains no longer bound it. Fear no longer ruled it. And when the first volley of fire rained down, the Titan did not falter. Humans at its side unleashed their rifles, grenades, and cunning tactics, weaving through the chaos with a bravery no alien could comprehend. The beast tore through the enemy with precision, not madness, its claws defending, its fury shielded by loyalty rather than rage. The aliens faltered once more. How could such fragile creatures tame what they had feared for centuries? How could compassion turn a monster into a protector? Defeat rippled through their ranks. Their ships retreated to the skies, abandoning the field to those who had claimed it with blood and courage. When the battle was over, the humans gathered at the Titan's feet, their faces weary but triumphant. The scarred leader leaned heavily on his rifle, then looked up at the giant who towered above them. "You're with us now," he said. "Not a weapon, not a prisoner, an ally." The words were simple, but to the beast they were everything. It lowered its head, bowing, not in servitude, but in respect. A vow formed deep within its chest, spoken not with words, but with the thunder of its heartbeat. They did not fear me. They did not abandon me. They stayed. And for that, I will never leave them. From that day forward, the galaxy whispered a new legend. Not of the monster chained and forgotten, but of the Titan who rose again. Not for those who cast it aside, but for the humans who saw worth where others saw only fear. And wherever humanity walked among the stars, the beast walked beside them.